it is that time. It's that time. This is the pre-show, and I've been cutting the pre-show out of the show. I might do that again. If I don't, you want to jump forward 5 minutes or look for the timestamp in the description. But I might cut it. Who knows? No one knows what I'm going to do. I'm unpredictable. Right now I'm going to grab the link from YouTube. We'll hang for 4 minutes. And then we're going to start promptly at 7. It says one person watching. That might be me. I might be the only person watching my own show. I'm okay with that, though, because I do it for the love of doing it. I don't do it for the fame. I don't do it for the money. I do it for the love of the game. All right, I'm tweeting this. Tweet it. It's been tweeted. No one's here yet. I could do whatever I want. I could read my social security number if I felt so inclined right now. I could really do anything. I could read all kinds of insurance documents. I could give out my phone number. No one would call me because no one's here. I could do anything. Total creative freedom. Really, that's what the show's about in a way, so it's perfect. Well, talking to myself, I'm just going to configure a few of these little windows that I got going on. I'm going to make sure we can read and see everything that we need to see and read. And then we're going to be good. Yo! Tyler Prime. It's just me and you. You've saved me from doing the show alone. I should just close it. Just me and you. We can hang out. How's it going, man? I'm just moving some stuff around here. It's funny, last time I cut the pre-show off, so I realized that in YouTube you can go in after the fact and like clip the little pre-show out, this part right here. So I did, because I was like, oh, I'm trying to be professional, why not? And then someone commented, they were like, oh, I missed the pre-show. I love that part. It's really funny. Some people cherish these unscripted moments with me. What's up? Nice. So yeah, right now I'm just gonna move some paints around, get it going here. What's going on with me? It's like the casual part of the show where I talk about what's going on with me. Nothing too exciting. My dog, I think my dog's like sick or something. She's been like extra annoying recently. I'm not gonna lie. It doesn't bother me. I'm cool with it. I love the dog. But I think she's like sick or something. I took her to the vet. They gave me this medicine, so it's been kind of funny because like I have to get like work done, and she comes and like there's nothing I can do about it. I like gave her the medicine. And I'm just like, yeah, you're not feeling great. That sucks. I wish your brain could comprehend that I've done all I can, and we're fixing it. We're addressing it, but there's nothing to be done in this moment. But she's cool. She's chilling. I think mostly she just wants like fancy food. Gonna move some paints around. What else is going on with me? Yo, can't wait to see. Someone said, can't wait to see you on Break the Rules. Yeah, man, I think that's going down next week or the week after. People have been asking me to go on for a minute. In case other people that are here don't know, that's like another YouTube show I got invited onto. And I think the topic is like religion and mysticism, so that should be very fitting. I like going on other people's podcasts and stuff like that, honestly. I don't do it too much, just because I don't like being off my own turf, honestly. But I really like doing it. And after doing it a few times, I kind of asked people to like start making the show like about a topic. Maybe this is interesting for people, maybe it's not, but like, doing what I do, I guess, to the extent that I do it. I wouldn't have anticipated this, but people invite you on their podcast and you're like, yeah, I'm down, like, cool, man. But then the thing is, obviously the listeners there don't necessarily know who you are. So then, like 75% of the show is you giving like an intro into like who you are. But then after I've done that like 4 or 5 times, I'm like, yeah, let's make it like about a topic, just so I don't have to do the whole like, my name's Owen. I do this. Let me put myself in this little box for you. I'm not going to put myself in a box, man. Nah, I will. I'm just moving some paint around here. Let's see what else. They interviewed Charles Carroll. Yeah, man, I haven't really checked out his vibe, but I think he is whenever someone posts a video of his or something he says, you know, I'm like, oh, I feel like this guy is kind of on like not the same wavelength as me, but like a similar one maybe. So I really want to check out, you know, what he does. I haven't really done it yet, to be honest with you. Okay, so it's 7 o'clock right now. Let's just wait literally like 1 or 2 minutes, just because I want to let people come in here, but I also want to honor the fact that you're here on time. So we'll wait 1-2 minutes and then we'll get this started. I am excited. Let's see, what else do I have to do? I have to make the little frame right here. Any interesting stories I can tell you guys? Anything interesting going down with me? Honestly, I've just been nose to the grindstone for the last week or so. I haven't really talked to anyone in normal life because I feel like normal people have gone completely insane, which is cool with me. I anticipated it. I'm okay with it. Something interesting I have been thinking a lot about. This is kind of weird. Do we have time for this? Maybe I should talk about it during the show. But aesthetically, I was thinking about... well, I'll talk about it during the show. Let's see, what else can I talk about here? It's winter. Any interesting books that I got? Oh, I did get a really cool book. I'll show you guys. So this will be the pre-show. I'll show you guys the book really quick, and then we'll jump in. Let's see. Where did I put it? Where did I put it? Obviously, I scripted everything except this moment where I want to show you this book. And I'm over here. Well, I can't find it, but I'll show you guys some other stuff I've been working on. Part of the vibe that I've been like picking up is, you know, right now we're about to talk about like Christianity related to Greek stuff and things like that. I picked up these books. I'm not going to show you all of them. I don't want to like be negative, but I don't recommend getting this second book here. It's actually written by this like really new agey guy. I kind of like regret getting it, honestly, but it's kind of cool to flex for a second. I was looking at some of these Egyptian texts, and I'm kind of like intrigued in an interesting way. I've been thinking a lot about like ancient stuff and how it relates to Christianity and things like that. I'm almost like burnt out on it. I'm almost ready to go back into like hardcore theology world, but I don't know if you guys know, but the pyramid text, it's actually pretty cool, man. I'm like giving away a whole nother episode that we're going to do later on. But these are like some of the oldest texts that you can read. I don't know if it would occur to most people, but like when you look at a pyramid and there's all that writing on the walls and stuff, they decoded that and translated it, and you can just go buy it. It's called the pyramid texts. And it's pretty interesting. And there's the pyramid text, there's the coffin text, and then there's the Egyptian Book of the Dead. Look at what I got prepped. Look at this. You think this is a joke out here? You think I'm playing around out here? Look at all these Post-it notes. Look at this. This is what I'm freaking making happen for the people. You think I'm doing this for my health out here? You think I'm not actually schizo? You think I'm playing a character when I talk to you guys? Of course I'm not. Anyway, that's enough. It's 7:03. It is time. We are going to do it. I'm going to pull the trigger on the intro right now. It still says season 2, but you know in real life it's season 3. Right. What is happening, people? How's it going? How's your life going right now? We're here for another episode of OPHANIM Painting Hour. And like everyone, oh yeah, maybe it's your first time here. Intro music, Painted Worlds. It's a painting show. Intro music is Painted Worlds. And eventually later when we're hanging out and I can see the chat, you got to put @O in Cyclops, otherwise I'm not going to see it. Those are the general announcements. But otherwise, How's it going? How's your life going? I hope it's going well. And like everyone says when they start a YouTube video, I kind of just want to jump right in. So we're going to do it. This is only episode 2 of the new season, so I'm still figuring a few things out. I went with sort of a more like simple drawing style for our little presentation here. So let's see how it goes. Let's just jump right in. In case you weren't here last week, we started looking at Clement of Alexandria's STROMATA, but last week was kind of just getting it going, seeing what the deal is with it, and some ideas that I had about it in general. So since I want the format of the show to be first half, we look at a text, second half, we do a picture based on it. Let's jump in and see what he actually has to say. I'm going to pull up. Wait, hold on one second. I actually realized that you can't hear me when I pull up the slideshow, so my bad. Literally just wait like 2 seconds. Hold on 1 second. Okay, we're good now? Poke, poke, poke. Little unprofessional moment, but that's why you're here. It's, this is not like a social media company fake operation. It's literally just me in my room. Can someone just confirm that you can hear me? I'm going to assume that you can. So I am just going to make moves. It's so funny. I'm sitting here all day at my desk like, man, we're going to do it professional. I'm going to be so on point. And then I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot to put the mic synced up with the slideshow. I'm going to assume that you guys can hear me. Just want one person to say they can. Can hear. Bam. All right, so let's do it. So pulling up this first slide, we were looking at Clement of Alexandria and his book STROMATA. In case you weren't here last week, literally 10-second recap. Clement of Alexandria, super early Christianity from Alexandria or Athens, hanging out in Alexandria, looking at stuff around him, trying to figure out what the deal is. And STROMATA is kind of just his random collected thoughts about different topics. And we're kind of seeing what he has to say about Greek philosophy relating to Christianity. He talked about it as kind of a prep for Christianity, but didn't really go into his ideas about it. So let's see what the deal is. Okay, perfect. Boom. So let's jump right in. Chapter 2 is called Objections to the Number of Extracts from Philosophical Writings in These Books Anticipated and Answered. Or basically, maybe you think this is a bad idea, me poking into Greek philosophy. Well, I don't, and here's why. In chapter 2, he lays out what he sees as the arguments coming his way about this theory he has and gives refutations of them. First up, he says even if Greek philosophy is all totally useless, if the demonstration of its uselessness does good for people, then it is useful. So in his view, I think this is true also, you can't really condemn something without knowing what the deal is with it. So even if after an investigation it turns out that all the stuff is useless and this whole endeavor was like a total failure, there's still a valid reason to get acquainted with it or other topics. He says the refutation based on experience is entirely trustworthy, as opposed to someone who just, heard something about something else and they say it's bad, but they don't really know why. I think this is an interesting point, and it's kind of like tangentially relevant to my whole operation I have going on here, because I think we actually need a lot more of that in the sort of theological, mystical, people who are aware that things aren't going perfectly in society, maybe. There's a lot of nefarious things being pumped everywhere all the time, and usually people on, the good side of things only know that they're bad, but they don't have firsthand experience with them. In fact, just today, someone DM'd me asking me if they knew any resources specifically from a Christian perspective about, why a specific New Age thing was bad. So it's easy to find people saying, yeah, it's bad, don't get involved with it, but it's kind of hard to find someone going into it and explicating exactly why with that firsthand experience. So just a little aside there that's relevant to us. I also like this quote he had. Many things, then, though not contributing to the final result, equip the artist. So obviously I'm very familiar with this. If we relate our own mental and spiritual development to what I'm familiar with, the practice of painting, not every single thing you take in is surface level visible in the final product, but of course it all contributes to the overall process of development, sometimes in ways that you can't understand. So going into other topics, is going to help you along your way, maybe in a way that you're not even going to anticipate right away. A little zoom out, by the way, because part of what I think is interesting in looking at the early Christian guys is the picture it paints of their scene, not just what they're literally saying. Isn't it kind of interesting that he feels the need to justify looking into Greek philosophy at all? I guess now you might get a little pushback on it if you went, really hard on certain topics. But we kind of consider it one of the marks of an educated person to be familiar with Greek philosophy. But it's interesting to imagine at the start of Christianity, when that relationship wasn't fully established, and instead of being viewed as this pillar of Western civilization, it was kind of just part of the paganism floating around. Obviously, the works of Plato and Socrates at that time would have already been, pretty old. But still interesting to imagine putting yourself in that mindset of 300 AD and making a case for why you're going to even bother looking into Greek philosophy at all. There's an interesting window here into Clement of Alexandria's writing style and his take on his whole work, as a cohesive body. He hints at this elsewhere in the book, but here he lays it out explicitly, so I pulled out this little quote. He said, "For I do not mention that the Stromata, the book that we're reading, forming a body of varied erudition, wishes artfully to conceal the seeds of knowledge. As then, he who is fond of hunting captures the game after seeking, tracking, scenting, and hunting it down with dogs, so truth, when sought and got with toil, appears a delicious thing." This made me think of the draw people have to generally like esoteric topics, or really esoteric imagery, actually. Images where you can feel there's something deeper going on, but it's not immediately apparent. I actually saw someone on Twitter recently. They posted an image online. I kind of cleaned it up a little bit because I'm trying to keep my G rating that I put on my front screen. But they saw this really strange image and with all this bizarre imagery. And there was this guy eating this kid, and there was this woman in this river, and they just posted it kind of offhand, like, wow, look how weird this is. And I was looking at it, and eventually I realized, oh, that guy in the middle is Saturn. And that's why he has a scythe above his head, because Saturn is associated with the scythe and the harvest, and he's eating a kid. Oh, it's like that Goya painting. Goya has that painting of Saturn eating his children. So that's Saturn. Maybe it's like an astrological thing. And then I thought, oh, that woman in the river, she's holding a mirror. That must be Venus. Venus is associated with mirrors, and it has a shell above her because, oh, Venus is born from the ocean in Greek mythology. And I started decoding this image, and it felt really good. If the picture was getting at something deeper, I think that effect is what Clement of Alexandria is describing here. It naturally feels really good to dig in and uncover something. Maybe we as like creative people can utilize that to draw people in. Consciously or not, I think I do that with my images. I know that it feels good for people to poke under the surface, so maybe subconsciously that's something that I've always been utilizing in my work. I also suspect that this is part of the draw of teaching in parables and symbolic stories, which, like we covered last week, Jesus taught in parables in the gospel. I've definitely found myself lying awake at night thinking about the symbolism of a short story or a parable, and sometimes there's this moment of unlocking it and punching one layer deeper into what it's trying to tell me, and that feels really good. And it's probably part of the draw of me being obsessed with that kind of thing and trying to go deeper into it. So maybe some people smarter than me have roped me in by using that effect as kind of a stick and carrot for me. Anyway, he takes... I drew this pig. I was laughing hysterically when I drew this. I don't know if the effect is carrying over to you, but I was really absolutely cackling when I drew this. He takes it a step further and says, because there's a great danger in divulging the secret of true philosophy to those whose delight it is to unsparingly speak against everything, not justly, and who shout forth all kinds of names and words indecorously, deceiving themselves and beguiling those who adhere to them. So he says, I'm also kind of intentionally keeping it secret because some people are just total charlatans and mislead others and just abuse the truth. So that's also part of why I'm doing this, is what he says. I usually don't take it that far. Maybe subconsciously I do, but I thought I'd make a note of the fact that he says that. I guess the biblical precedent, why you're looking at this picture now, would be, give not that which is holy unto dogs, neither cast ye your pearls before swine. So there is some kind of scriptural precedence for doing that in the first place. The next chapter is titled Against the Sophists. I think everyone knows why people don't like the Sophists. He says, inflated with this art of theirs, the wretched Sophists, babbling away in their own jargon, toiling their whole life about the division of names and the nature of the composition and conjunction of sentences, show themselves greater charlatans than turtle doves, scratching and tickling, not in a manly way, in my opinion, the ears of those who wish to be tickled. I like that image there, tickling, but not in a manly way. Anyway, we don't need to go into the Sophist too much. We're kind of just going to skip this chapter. In case people don't know, Sophist is now a shorthand for basically a charlatan, someone who just kind of says stuff but doesn't really have like underlying ideas. Probably everyone online knows that. We all encountered those people. But there actually were a group of specific people called the Sophists, again, in case some people don't know. Socrates talked about them, and he kind of characterized them as the ones who use certain aspects of philosophy, like rhetoric mostly, to teach people how to talk about things and how to convince people of things, regardless of what is actually true. I think of them as kind of like a negative or evil or maybe just neutral use of philosophy, where you can make the weaker argument look stronger and just teach other people how to convince others using rhetoric, again, regardless of what's actually true. Since we're going into that, we're going to skip over it, but since we touched on it for a second, I wanted to drop a little flip on the sophists. I had someone explain them to me this way, so I kind of just want to give you this little idea that I found really interesting. So of course the sophists are like bad in philosophy because we, went down this road and we view them as charlatans basically. But what someone told me, and after this I felt like I kind of saw it from their angle, in order to understand someone's view you have to be able to explain it from their angle. So what they told me was the reason the sophists exist and why they came about at that juncture in time is because all of a sudden you had, let's say, a little bit of a good amount of philosophy floating around. So there were these guys that came along at a certain point where a few really, really smart guys had already laid out their view of the world and their view of things. And when you go into philosophy, you obviously know, even in theology, anywhere, you find people who disagree with each other. So these guys did that, and they looked at Plato, and they looked at Aristotle, and they looked at Socrates, and they took a very interesting angle on it, because what they said was, well, we can find all these philosophers, and they're way smarter than us. These are like the smartest guys, and they don't even agree with each other. So if these guys who were the best at philosophy couldn't figure it out and convince each other, and they're disagreeing with themselves, how could we possibly figure it out? We're just these random guys on the bottom of the pyramid here. So they turned their attention to the practical uses of things like rhetoric. In their mind, they're thinking, well, if these guys who are way smarter than us couldn't figure out cosmology and why tables are tables and all this stuff, why don't I just take this rhetoric I have and try and get a good job and make a lot of money for my family and teach other people how to get good jobs and teach people to be convincing and charming people. And that's basically what their angle on it was. I'm not saying that's legitimate, but I thought it was kind of cool to get red-pilled on the sophists. There you go. That's what the sophists, maybe what they would say they were doing. So anyway, little detour is over. Boom. The next chapter was called Human Arts as Divine Knowledge Proceeding from God. So we're going to kind of rush through this too to get to the chapter that I actually want to talk about, chapter 5. But basically the deal here is he said, being good at things is a kind of wisdom. You get good at a skill, that's a kind of wisdom that you have, and wisdom comes from God. So in a way, the human arts that you see everywhere that people have varying skills in, that's a kind of a form of divine knowledge that comes from God. The main thing that's relevant to us here is that he characterizes people who are good at things as having, this is a quote, a nature peculiar to themselves, end quote, by which they receive wisdom from God via that particular nature and via their willingness to strive after it and work after it and develop that peculiar nature. So that's pretty obvious, right? People that are good at art, you might say they're gifted in the senses. People who are good musicians, you might say they're gifted in hearing. People who are sculptors, you might say they're gifted in the sense of touch. You could go on and on and on. And he goes through all these analogies and leaves it off with the philosophers, who obviously they have a nature and skill, but it's kind of interesting because if you think about it, that nature and skill, does it lead to God and piety? It kind of does, because you're building up wisdom and thinking about things more deeply, but it also kind of doesn't, because if you're just sitting around thinking all the time, it doesn't necessarily lead you to God. You could be thinking about the wrong things or think about, random things, so it's kind of interesting. It leaves you hanging in this gap of, does the skill of being good at thinking, as opposed to like poetry or art or something, naturally lead you to God? It kind of does, it kind of doesn't, and it leaves you hanging there. And that's how we get to the chapter that I really wanted to talk about. Boom! I was really proud of this image right here. Philosophy, the Handmaiden of Theology. That's the title of the chapter. I mentioned this last week, but a lot of us probably know this quote from Thomas Aquinas, but this is obviously way, way, way earlier. And this was the main thing I wanted to siphon out of the start of this book, so I don't even know how much further we're going to go into the book, because I really just wanted to hit him making this case about philosophy as the handmaiden of theology. So now that we're here, I'm going to pull out a pretty big quote, and let's see what he has to say. We came all the way here, so let's see what the man himself has to say. It says, accordingly, so just keep in mind, I just want to be totally clear, so we just left off at Does philosophy as a skill lead you to God? Kind of not. You kind of need a little bit of a road marker. Maybe it's kind of ambiguous. So we just left off there. And this is the first thing he says in the chapter. Accordingly, before the advent of the Lord, philosophy was necessary to the Greeks for righteousness, and now it becomes conducive to piety, being a kind of preparatory training to those who attain to faith through demonstration. For the foot, it is said, will not stumble if thou refer to what is good, whether belonging to the Greeks or to us, to providence. I couldn't find where that quote's from, by the way. For God is the cause of all good things, but of some primarily, as of the Old and New Testament, and of others by consequence, as philosophy. Perchance, too, philosophy was given to the Greeks directly and primarily, till the Lord should call the Greeks. Let me read that again. Perchance, too, philosophy was given to the Greeks directly and primarily, till the Lord should call the Greeks. For this was a schoolmaster to bring the Hellenic mind, as the law brought the Hebrews to Christ. Philosophy, therefore, was a preparation, paving the way for him who is perfected in Christ. I really, really like that. Jumping ahead a little bit. Now, so he's quoting Solomon, he's quoting the Psalms here. Now, says Solomon, defend wisdom, and it will exalt thee, and it will shield thee with a crown of pleasure. For when thou hast strengthened wisdom with a cope by philosophy, and with the right expenditure, thou wilt preserve it unassailable by sophists. The way of truth is therefore one, but into it, as a perennial river, streams flow from all sides. And then there's this whole interesting part where he's quoting from Proverbs and using it as an analogy to make his point and qualifying a little bit. So if you have hung out in kind of weirdo, mystical theology world or surveyed, different thinkers, maybe like some big red lights went off when I was reading that last line, because it kind of seems like he's making a case for what I would call perennialism. In case people don't know, perennialism, if I'm going to oversimplify it, is kind of this idea that, well, you look out, you see all these different religions, all these different wisdom traditions from all these different cultures, and you know what? They're all kind of basically saying the same thing. There's this underlying truth underneath them all, and if you're really smart, you can dig in and see that basically they're all getting at the same thing. That's like an oversimplification, but that's kind of my take on it. So I don't really think that's true. I don't really necessarily think it's 100% the vibe, but that's not what he's saying, and he clarifies it in this little analogy right here. So he's still quoting Solomon, quoting from Psalms, and when he says, "Be not much with a strange woman," he admonishes us to use indeed, but not to linger and spend time with, secular culture. For what is bestowed on each generation advantageously and at seasonable times is a preliminary training for the word of the Lord. I really love that little passage there and wanted to jump off from there for a second before we get into making our image, because reading that really clarified a lot of my own thoughts on things like this. He applies to cultures and what came before Christianity in a lot of sense, what he's saying. So he's applying that on like a macro scale of like civilizations and cultures. But I also think it applies to individuals and the way that we experience secular culture. So much of our analysis of things, if you're living in this world where you're really reflecting on your own spirit and how you are relating to the things around you, at least for me, so much of that analysis hinges on this dichotomy of, well, is it good or bad? Should I bring this thing into my house and put it on an altar, or should I stay as far away from this thing as possible? And that's kind of how, I don't want to say we, maybe I'm just speaking for myself, go around seeing different things. I'm American. I don't know what it's like in other countries. But even as someone who converted to Christianity, I can say that there's that tension in American Christianity for sure, both from what I've read and what I've just generally experienced in my own life. I would say especially in evangelical Christianity, but I'm not evangelical, but I'm kind of just sympathizing with them. I feel like that's where the tension is really, really high. Not in a bad way, just because they're naturally kind of the most popular group. But anyway, the tension of, is secular culture this horrible thing we should run away from and stay away from? Or do we try and poke into it and see what good we can get going in that sphere? More directly, if individuals are a microcosm means like a small version of their culture and civilization at large. So if you're like a tiny version of the culture that you live in, we all have this problem, right? We all have things from our past, or even now, could be literally anything. Anything that's part of your life could be secular, or maybe it just seems secular, or whatever it is. And I feel it, maybe you do also. Sometimes there's this tension, like I'm saying, well, should I be doing this thing? I really should be focusing more of my time aiming myself and my goals and my spirit at like higher things, but I kind of like some of this other stuff that maybe is secular, maybe it just seems secular. Is it bad? Do I have to throw out this stuff and like condemn it? Like, what's the deal? So I think this passage from Clement of Alexandria really illuminated some of what I've been thinking about a lot of things like this, because it doesn't exactly fit into that dichotomy. The secular stuff, certain aspects of pre-Christian philosophy, in the analogy I'm making right now, some things in your own life, maybe they aren't like bad, like they're evil, but they're also not a good in and of themselves. They have what I would call a semiotic function. That's a really pretentious way of saying that they point to something else. Maybe they're kind of like training wheels, and it's cool for us to poke into them and hang around them to the extent that they facilitate our positive spiritual growth. This is a really cool realization for me to have, like while I was thinking about all this stuff over the last few weeks, really my whole life, but whatever the time frame is, because I really feel that tension all the time. I have so many things in my mind, and right now I'm thinking of everything from like random minutia, like I'm walking down the street and I'm like, oh, I used to play Pokemon when I was a little kid. That's an interesting thing to remember. Or all the way up to things now where, I'm really interested in some topics outside of Christianity. Like if you were just here before the show, I was showing some of the pyramid texts and things, from Egyptian culture. So, and I feel that tension of like, is this bad? I mean, it's not good, like it's not divine really, but it doesn't feel bad. So, what's the deal? It's a lot easier for me to take a step back and say, like Clement of Alexandria is kind of saying, or maybe like I'm forcing him to say in my very forced analogy, that these things are like pointers or stops along the road that serve as training wheels or temporary platforms to stand on to get to a higher place spiritually. And as long as they stay like that and don't become an end in and of themselves, they're not bad. I will say though, as someone who often does take like really long, weird roads into all these different topics that I'm characterizing in this way, there is this tangible feeling I always have when I get back to theology world. Like over the last few weeks, well, not the last few weeks, really just the last week, honestly. We talked about it for a second at the start of the show. With all the media stuff, I kind of was thinking about like, our life and tech and weird stuff about the future. And I went into this whole little hole of like, I don't know if people know about this stuff, like Mark Fisher and imagined futures and how we have this future we imagined, but now it kind of is the future, and academics like tripping out about like post-modernity and liquid modernity and all this different stuff. And it's interesting and like it's cool, right? But then when I come back to like theology world, there's this feeling of like, oh yeah, like this is where I'm supposed to be. And even all that stuff, I kind of characterize it in the way I was just saying. If it has a semiotic function, if it's pointing towards these higher aims and informing my spiritual process in some way, then yeah, it's probably good. But if I got like hyper vexed by it and just sort of like lost my way and just hung out with that stuff forever and made it a good in and of itself, then yeah, maybe that wouldn't really be the best thing. Anyway, so he ends this chapter with, "We merely therefore assert here that philosophy is characterized by investigation into truth and the nature of things. This is the truth of which the Lord himself said, 'I am the truth.' And that again, the preparatory training for rest in Christ exercises the mind, rouses the intelligence, and begets an inquiring shrewdness by means of the true philosophy, which the initiated possess, having found it, or rather received it, from the truth itself." I thought that was a really awesome way to end it there. Anyway, so that's the first 5 chapters of the Stromata. Really, I guess you're always going to hear it like through the lens of me and my ideas about it. So I'm not just going to read the book to you, but that's kind of the first 5 chapters and what I took away from it. And I really enjoyed that kind of like extended metaphor. Maybe I just read into it. Maybe it's not present in the text at all. But, the secular being a pointer towards the spiritual, and in that way it can be fruitful, but otherwise maybe it's not the best thing. Wow, I made such a good point and I felt the vibe and I landed on this really good platform and then I pressed the wrong button. Anyway, so I feel really good talking to you guys about all that stuff. And we can keep talking about it. I can poke in the chat, see what people are saying. But now it's time. The second half of the show, we are literally exactly right on schedule. We couldn't be more on schedule because right now it's 7:30 and that's the perfect halfway mark. Yeah, my bad. I think I clicked the intro button with the donut where it has like really, really loud guitar music, so my bad. And I lulled you into this. I lulled you into a really nice state. You were like, wow, it's so deep and nice, and I'm reflecting on my life, and then bam, bam. There's no respite. There's no rest anywhere. Anyway, so obviously, you know, I'm always going to be feeling out how to do the show. It's never going to become a static, dead, formulaic thing. That's what keeps it fun. And thinking about all that stuff, I was thinking about what image I wanted to use, you know, for our picture here. And it's interesting, just the process, the meta-creative process going on here, because I can't just illustrate exactly what we talked about because that's what I did. I just showed you all those pictures where I literally just illustrated exactly what we talked about. So I wanted to maybe go like a little bit deeper into the symbolism of how all that stuff manifests. And what I was thinking is I do have an image that I want to use right now that we're going to paint up. But first I'm just going to draw it. I'm going to, boom, just grab this little card right here. And I have this little image that I was thinking of. I'm just going to grab a pen. Use this guy, perfect. So this is a little tour into some slight esoterica. Most people probably know what this is, but there's something called Mandrake. It's a really, really big jump. Seems like it is, but not really. And if you ever see Mandrake in like a medieval painting or before that in like an etching or a drawing or something, the way it's drawn is that there's sort of like a person underneath the ground. And then this person has this sprout, sort of like a big ferny, it's almost like a fern really, set of leaves coming up out of the surface. In case you don't know, Mandrake is a root plant. It's like ginger, you know, so it grows underground, or like ginseng. Really, it's actually exactly like ginseng if you've ever seen ginseng in real life. And it has this sort of like fat, rooty part, but that's what you want. That's what it is. It is the root itself, sort of like celery root or, you know, many vegetables that you know. And it shoots up this plant above the surface. So the thing about Mandrake is that it often grows almost the root in this weird kind of person-y form. If you actually see one, sometimes they really do have this shape. Like they'll literally be like the shape of a person almost. And because it has these, you know, psychoactive properties, people used to use it in like magic potions and stuff like that. It began to obviously have this magical lore and these ideas about it. So people started to say that the root was actually like a human body, almost like a homunculus, almost like a tiny human like growing up under the earth. And there's really cool imagery and things about it. Like, for example, they used to say that what you would do is you'd have to, you know, cover your ears and have your dog pull it up, or you train your dog to pull it up and you'd be really far away. Because they would say when you pulled it out of the ground, this guy would scream. The Mandrake man would scream, and if you heard the scream, it would make you go deaf. I suspect, having been around people who collect ginseng and things like that, that tale emerged because some idiots would go through the forest and harvest all the Mandrake. So someone said, hey, if you pull it up, it screams and you're gonna go deaf. Don't do that. So anyway, I've had that image in my mind, and what I drew one time was I kind of flipped it on its head a little bit, and I drew a guy poking up out of the surface of the earth. I use this in my drawings all the time, and then he has the plant on his head, and then sometimes I even make his bottom like different roots and stuff like that. And somehow I just kind of felt like this was an appropriate image. You know, we're talking about like the seeds of a culture and developing spiritually and being prepared, you know, to receive like the sun, like the light of the Lord and stuff. So I think we're going to use this image. That's what we're going to jump off from. So I also was planning on just breaking out the black markers this week. I was really thinking about it. But if we're going to do the Mandrake thing with the plant, I mean, it's just so watercolory. We're not going to do that this week, but 1 week soon, we'll do just the drawing. Anyway, I'm prepping, got the paper towel, and we're good to go. So we really have two options jumping off right here. I could do it like we're looking at a horizon, and you can see the guy with his roots and everything, or I could do it like he's in a pot. I kind of was thinking of like a houseplant kind of thing, but now that I drew the guy with the roots, I think we should go that way. As you know, if you've been here before, the real choice that we're going to start out with is what color we're going to roll with off the bat. That kind of decides a lot. I feel like if it's Mandrake, we're just going to go with brown. So I'm going to use this burnt sienna, and that's what we're going to start with right now. And you may also notice, if you've been here a bunch before, that I got the gray palette. I got the gray over here because I watched back the last episode. I actually watched it in its entirety. That's my commitment to providing an excellent show for you guys. And I realized that with the white, you can't even see the paint. You can't even see like what I'm doing over here. So I thought the gray would be an upgrade, so I picked it up. And let's just jump right in. I'm going to try and do this kind of quickly, just because. Not just to make it interesting, but also keep the wheels moving. So let's just go with it. And just, again, a little kind of meta-creative note. What I'm thinking in my mind is what's going to be on his left and right is really going to be like the biggest factor. We're going to have his hands up. I'm just going to go for it with the upturned hands, like he's reaching up. That's what we really want. I'm going to come in, and maybe we can even color him like a root. That would be kind of cool. This is burnt. Well, you can see the color so much better. This is awesome. I'm also not blowing out the light so much anymore, but we'll see if that's an improvement or not. So we can also kind of color him this rooty color. And there's another symbol I want to throw down. So the two symbols I was thinking about were the Mandrake guy. It's not really a Mandrake guy, though, because he's not fully underground, but sort of like the plant man. That's how I think of him when I paint him. It's the plant man. And I was also thinking about bones for some reason. It's not directly related, but there's something about like the bone image. I was really thinking about it a lot this week. Sometimes a symbol will just jump out and get kind of like lodged in my brain. And I was thinking about bones and how they kind of represent like ancestors and like antiquity. They're primal, but we still have them. They're kind of primitive looking. It's kind of interesting to unpack why bones are primitive looking, but we have bones ourselves. It's kind of a weird twist in the symbolism there. And like I was just saying, I'm going to come in with the roots here. So we're going to give this guy long roots because we're thinking about preparation, preparatory forces. And sometimes when I do the roots, you really have two options. I can come in and do the like super organic looking roots where it's really wavy and, sort of like real roots, but I like something about these angular roots coming down. Maybe it's because of how illustrative they are, because of how like picture-y they are. But I really like that. So I'm going to come down. I can also look at the chat now, so if anyone wants to say anything or ask me anything, you can. Otherwise, I'm just going to go on. And one other symbol thing here that I'm thinking of is, this is a perfect example. If you were here way back in the beginning, we talked about this, but in most medieval style imagery, or medieval imagery itself, and this is like pan-universal, really, in my opinion, not just in Western culture, but in pretty much all places. Whether it's intuitive or whether it's just a natural aspect of the picture plane or whatever, you get this natural breakup of the picture space in a lot of sacred imagery, where the top is reserved for kind of like heaven or the heavens or the deities or whatever in that cosmology, whatever's up in the sort of divine realms will naturally be at the top of the picture. Then in the middle, you get the terrestrial plane. You get us, our world in the middle. And then down below, you'll sometimes get like the underworld or things like that. I initially picked that up from Tibetan painting. That's how Tibetan scroll paintings are broken up. Except they don't have the underworld there. There they have a space reserved for like gifts and offerings for the deities, but it's kind of similar if you really get into it, which I'm not going to do right now. And then I noticed it in other pictures, and I think it's part of a natural thing that happens, when people are making images. If you think heaven is up above, then of course naturally you're going to put it at the top of your picture. Boom. Just kind of went for it and threw down that horizon there. If we don't like it, we can make it a little blurry. We can get it going there. I want to shade him in, but this burnt umber, it's such a rich, burnt sienna, it's such a rich color. This is not really the color we want for like a root. If you imagine like a nub of ginger, imagine ginger, something like that. That's the color that we want, that kind of tan root feeling. So I'm going to grab, this is raw sienna. I'm going to take out the raw sienna here. I was tempted to use yellow ochre. It's almost the same color. I'll break it out so you can see actually. It's almost the same color. But yellow ochre, this is the color that you use to dull everything else. So this might actually be the right move. You can see it's a really subtle difference. Can you see? Oh, you can see on the camera. Wow, nice. I got this really expensive camera. So you can see here, I'll drag out the colors a little bit. It's a very subtle difference, right? But it actually does make a huge difference when you're painting. The raw sienna is super like enlivening. Can I use that word? It's very enlivening. Here, I'm gonna throw on this card really quick, just so we can really see. So you can see this is like a live, active, really warm color. But then let's see what the yellow ochre looks like. I know, but I'll show you. And then you can see here, yeah. See the difference? They look so similar. Maybe they don't look similar to you, but they look so similar. But they're really like, this in painting is literally like a world apart just because of how the pigment functions. If you add this to any color, it like dulls it down and brings it down. Like if I'm painting someone with a blue shirt and the blue is just too loud, I'll mix this in and it'll kill it a little bit. With purple, I don't really use purple pigments ever, but if I did, I'll often throw this in because it'll just tame it a little bit. But the raw sienna, it's kind of the opposite. It has its own like enlivening effect. So on that note, let's just, well, let's see. We can look at them dry over here. Honestly, I feel like the yellow ochre is the way to go here. This really has that like root color quality. This one really doesn't. Let's go with the yellow ochre. Ochre, by the way, speaking of ancient stuff and all that, is one of the oldest pigments. If you really want to trip out and think about how your mind is like hardwired for color and stuff, probably if you subscribe to like a normal historical timeline with, you know, people going through thousands of years of evolution and stuff like that or whatever. Actually, even if you don't actually, if you subscribe to any kind of like early civilizationally model, the first pigment humans probably used is black because we had fires. You pick up the black from the fire after it's burnt. So probably the first color that humans ever had access to would be black. But then after that, you get the ochres because you can find like this color dirt and all that kind of stuff. And we have like cave paintings and early paintings and stuff like that where people use these colors. So it's kind of interesting if you think about it. Your ancestors first had access to black, and then someone probably dug up some ochre pigments, and that was basically it for a long time probably. So I'm just going to throw this down over here. And I really want that like root quality. So I'm going to see if I can get it by like selectively dabbing up parts of it. Really, I want like bands, but I don't want it to look like too overworked. So let's see. Pretty good. I'll definitely take it. I'll take it for now, for sure. And then for underground, well, you know, let's mix it up. Underground, I'll use the raw sienna. We'll come down here. And I guess we have to kind of decide what we want around him. It would be cool if underground, I could put some water down here, like he's reaching down and that's what kind of nourished him in the early stages of life. Obviously, it fits with the themes we were talking about here. I was also thinking when I was planning this picture out, sometimes I plan the picture out, sometimes I don't, because I think it's sometimes more interesting if I just come up with it on the fly. But I was thinking, you know, what represents like Greek culture? What represents like Hellenic culture? Because, you know, I could paint like a Greek temple. We've all seen that before. It's kind of interesting imagining civilizations as having like different embodiments and things like that. So I'm going to come in with the brown on these roots. And down here, I'm definitely going to throw in the bone, because that has been on my mind all week, really. It's been on my mind all week. You know, it's funny, speaking of preparatory culture, and I had a few slides referencing video games and stuff like that. Seems like a really random tangent, but it's actually not. I poked into this game series that I think subconsciously may have like really affected my aesthetic when I was way younger. It's called Oddworld. I don't know if people know about this game. It's a PS1 game. But anyway, I looked back into it and I thought back over the story, and it's really interesting. I'm going to tell you the story in a second once I get locked into it. I'm going to paint in the blue down here like he's puncturing into the water while I tell you that. Also, for long watchers of the show, are you ready for this? If you're a long watcher of the show, you know I have a feud right now with the paint making company known as Winsor & Newton, because every tube of cerulean blue I've bought has been hard. They changed something about the pigment or something, so I get these tubes and they're rock hard, and I've cut them open on the show. It looks pretty cool on the camera, but it's not ideal. And I found in this box I forgot about a soft tube of cerulean blue. So we have access again to the color. And I love this color, so we're going to use it today because I just found it. But it's actually not good for water. We're going to use cobalt blue for the water. Got it right here. Boom. Anyway. So I was thinking about the plot of this game. Normally I wouldn't talk about something like this after the whole thing that we just talked about, but I think it actually is pretty interesting because you find interesting little tidbits in odd places. And basically what the plot of this game was, I played it when I was way younger, is that this guy is... It also relates to something else I want to talk about. I'm not just like, giving you random monologues. But this guy, he's part of this race. They're like a sort of like amphibian-y humans. Oh, I gotta make this way lighter because I don't want to have to navigate all around the roots there. So let's see how we can do this. So he's part of this race of people, and they're like enslaved to work in this like dystopian techie. Yeah, there we go. That's what we want. This like dystopian like tech factory, and they make like snack food there. So they used to make these snacks from these one creatures, and then the creatures went extinct, and they used to make snacks from another creature, and then those creatures went extinct. And he's working late one night, and he stumbles into this boardroom, and he sees that their next plan is to make snacks out of his people, his like race of people that are like enslaved in this weird techno factory. More like, not techno, it's more like industrial. It's more like dirty industrial. That's what you should imagine. So he goes on this quest to like save the people enslaved in this factory. But it's interesting because when he leaves the factory, the world outside the factory is like this primordial, almost like ancient, mystical, weird, like hoodoo-y stone stuff. And he meets this shaman who tells him that his destiny is to like save his people. And he goes through these temples that are dedicated like to those creatures and sees how life was, before all this industry like took over everything. And he goes back and he saves him. He shuts down the factory. And the next one, I'm just gonna make this like a 1-minute story because it is interesting and relevant. And the next one, man, look how good this looks with the water down here. We got that like texture going on. It's perfect. It's literally perfect. I'm gonna paint 2 bones in on the side, and then we'll see how we want to take it from there. And I'm gonna use black for the bones. We worked in black last time. I'm gonna use black for the bones. Anyway, so the next one got me. Maybe this is what got me thinking about bone symbolism. Is right after he saves the people, he like hits his head, and these ghosts of his ancestors, these like ancestor ghosts, appear to him, and they tell him that there's this place called Necrum, where they used to bury their dead, and that now what those like executive creatures are doing, the creatures that had them enslaved in that factory he destroyed, they're taking the blind members of his race, these blind creatures who can't see what they're doing, and getting them to harvest the bones of their ancestors in this place called Necrum. And they're turning those bones, they don't say it's alcohol, but into this basically like alcoholic brew, and using it to like poison everyone. And when you go over like symbolism and symbolic stuff and tales from different cultures and things like that, sometimes things have what I call like a symbolic like resonance. They kind of like resonate in a weird way. The way if you have like a sitar or guitar strings and you play a note and then some of the other strings will vibrate, sometimes like symbols and little weird arrangements of things will have that quality. And in a way, that's what I seek out as an artist. When I was first getting into doing art and stuff in a particular style, I realized you could make things look kind of deep if you just arbitrarily like combine symbols and stuff. There was a time where I would just sit down on my desk and I'd say, oh, okay, what's cool? Let's say there's an astronaut, and maybe the astronaut, maybe his face is a ladybug. And the astronaut's head is like a ladybug, and instead of being in space, he's in a big cup. And the cup, a bird's drinking from the cup. Okay, that's a weird picture, I'll make it. And I used to kind of operate that way, but after a while I was like, you can just arbitrarily combine symbols and make them look kind of cool, But like I just said, sometimes when you get them in a certain way, they resonate in a way that's different than an arbitrary combination of them all. And I was thinking about that just little tale I just told you. And there's something there that was just so weird. I was like, taking the bones of the ancestors and making it into this like intoxicating beverage, and they're using blind creatures to harvest it, like they can't see what they're doing, so they're willing to harvest the bones of their ancestors, but normally they wouldn't do that. It's like a condition of their blindness, Blindness essentially always obviously being a metaphor for spiritual sight. And I don't know, man. Just something to think about. I just thought it was interesting. The bones is really what got me. Like harvesting the bones. I don't know, man. It's really interesting. And then maybe it's because I was also reading and thinking about all this ancient stuff. I was thinking about bones and their symbolism. Like I said before, it's something weird about the fact that, on the one hand, they're fragile, right? Like bone weapons and bone necklaces and all that kind of primitive looking stuff. Like bones have a connotation of fragility. It's almost like in that cultural context, they exist in contrast to metals and stones and things like that. But for you in your personal body and in your like personal constituency, The bones are what hold you up. It's the opposite. The bones are like the most strong thing in your body. So it's weird. Like within the body, the bones have a connotation of strength and structure, and they're like what's holding everything together. They're like the most structurally strong things. But then once they leave the body and go into the social sphere, it's the opposite. They have a connotation of like ancient, primitive, almost like useless in a weird way. I don't know. Interesting. Anyway, we're going to move on from that. As usual, I don't have any answers. I only have questions. So I got this guy underneath, and he's going to be reaching up. And, of course, in the heavenly sphere, we're going to use the sun. The sun, which illuminates all things, is going to be our symbol for God and the divine that he's reaching up to. Omnia Sol. The sun illuminates everything. Even when I am far away. That's from a Latin poem. The sun illuminates everything, even when I am far away. What's the rest of it? Ama mi fideliter, fidem mea noto. Anyway, so I got the sun up here. And I'm going to push the watercolory texture a little bit. I'm going to drop it down at the bottom. Let's see, maybe we'll get the orange bleeding out a little bit around the structure over here. Bones, the sun. Also in my mind, after a long time, especially thinking about, you know, Greek, Christian, pagan, moving in periods of time, part of, in my opinion, what gives Christianity the strength it does, aside from being real, is that it's integrated into time in a way that I think is unique. And I think in my mind, after a long time, I've sort of broken up symbols into time periods also in a way. And there are some symbols that I put in the like primal folder, in like the primordial folder, you could say. And things like the sun, bones, the moon, stars. There's a set of symbols I have where when I use them, I'm like, oh, we're going there. We're going into like primal world. Like the deepest part of the mind. The symbols that any human that ever existed would recognize, at least in some way. Sort of like the de facto conditions of playing on this server. And let's see, I'm going to get the orange up against the yellow here. I got a nice little, oh, you can't see because of the light. My bad. Still figuring out the lighting. This is the last hurdle I have to cross. I got a little bit of a fade there, but I kind of wanted a little bit more. Kind of want a little bit more than that. Let's see, I'm going to pull this up a little bit more. Caves, water, yeah, someone said in the chat, caves and water for sure. And let's see. So we got a nice little structure going on here. And let's see, maybe I can pull this out a little bit more. Do I want to get the blue right up against it? There we go. That fuzz is exactly what I wanted. But over here, I think it's a little bit too dry. It's okay though. I'm going to drop another color in with the yellow here, just to give us that sense of like a cosmic glow, because he's being drawn up towards the sun. I suppose in our analogy, in our reading of the Stromata, the water below is like the preparation. The water below is like the preparatory culture that Clement of Alexandria describes. And then the preparatory culture has allowed this Mandrake man to puncture the surface and reach up towards the sun. In his infancy, when he was just a little nublet, just a little root underneath the surface, he was nurtured by the water. And then when it was time, he was drawn up and brought up towards the sun. Boom, coming in with the yellow, and that did not fade. Look at that. This is how watercolor is. You saw me drop the water down, didn't go anywhere. Look at the orange. Look at that awesome fade. Yellow, literally didn't do anything. Literally did nothing. Useless. Useless, but it's okay. And I suppose we also want to see what else we want to throw in the sky. I got another idea. See, sometimes I like to do the symbolic thinking on the fly because I can talk about it with you guys. Sometimes I don't, but today that's what we're doing. Part of what I like doing about the show is having like a meta-creative aspect. Whatever your field is, maybe you knit, maybe you right? Maybe you don't do anything yet. But there's a meta-creative aspect that permeates all disciplines. A thing that we all share, which is the creative process itself. I was thinking that I want to throw down, just to drive home that point about him like piercing the surface, I'm going to throw these 2 other seeds. We used the seed last week, so in a way this is kind of cheating, but for us it's okay. I'm just going to throw down these 2 seeds that are also piercing the surface there. Let's see. Perfect. I'm trying to figure out how I can do the lighting, but this is actually good. I'm going to grab the green. We'll get those plants coming out. And let's see, we need at least one more like big symbol making a statement in here. So I guess we can think about what we were talking about. Preparatory culture, things unfolding over time. Time's a good one. Long time periods. Let's see, what else do we got? Let's take a minute. Let's take 1 second. We don't need to be on hyper crazy rush, although we are approaching 8 o'clock. Night. Okay, so maybe we're sticking with the primordial things, but night, of course, represents, you know, spiritual darkness in a way. So maybe night. Maybe the answer is night over here. I'm gonna grab the ultramarine. This is just a nice dark blue. Actually, yeah, I'm gonna use the ultramarine. So I'm gonna throw the ultramarine in here, and since we're talking about things changing over from before Christianity to after, sometimes I do think of that. Obviously, I did not come up with this analogy, but sometimes I do think of that as like the night and day of human civilization. Since the yellow didn't do what I wanted, I'm going to see maybe the blue will like bleed into the yellow and give me the effect that I'm looking for. You know, sometimes I imagine all the pre-incarnation thinkers, you know, from all different cultures, all different places. It's kind of like they're in the night of human history. It's before the incarnation, so they're in the dark. They're trying to figure it out. Night is also kind of scary, naturally, if you've ever been out alone at night in the woods for a few days. And that's kind of like how I imagine the pre-incarnation guys. Like doing the best they can, but they're in like the night of human civilization as a whole. And then after the incarnation, it's like day. Like the sun has risen, everything's totally different. Everything's the same, but it's different. That's the other aspect of night symbolism that's cool. Really, the only thing that's different from the night to the day is it's only one thing, but somehow it makes everything different, doesn't it? So I'm going to come in here with the blue. I like this blue. The ultramarine is good. It gives way really easily to these nice, like, lighter blues. I should have used a larger brush for this, but I just didn't. But I should have. You really don't want these, like, little twitchy strokes down here, but it'll be fine for now. Partially because it's so wet, it won't really matter. All right. Let's see. Anything else developing over time? Symbolism? Could put a tree. Sometimes I use a tree, like growing. Oh, you know what I have used a lot, actually? I've used a flower blooming from one side to the other. That actually is kind of a cool thing. Let's do that. That's what I was looking for. I was looking for what the answer was going to be, but that's what it is. I should use a rose, but the effect won't be as solid if I use a rose, so we're not going to use a rose. We're going to do something else. And then what am I doing with the ground over here? You know, part of me, if I'm doing this effect, can I pull the black out? The black is too dry. It would have been cool to grab this black and just be able to pull it out and kind of shade it out down here. But let's see what I can do when I hit it with the water down here. Really, I'm just going to get all this wet. Again, it's really stupid I'm using this small brush, but it's all good. Maybe you only have a small brush. Okay, perfect. And now I got this all wet down here. And let's see, I think I'm just gonna, oh, Venetian red, perfect. But you can see, sometimes you hit snags. I'm almost out of Venetian red. Yeah, someone said the sun looks like an egg. Yeah. See, if I was trying to be a charlatan, I would say, well, it's intentional. Egg represents birth and new life, but actually it's not intentional. Let's see what we can get going with the brown down here. Maybe we'll get a few browns going on. We so rarely like mix pigments on the show. And again, this is not really doing what I wanted either. So I'm actually digging right into the tube here. That's what you have to do if you... And see, some pigments just stay. They don't move. They do nothing. You do nothing for me. There we go. There we go. And some of them are more alive. Some of them have that life and they move. That's pretty good. Let's see, maybe we can get a cool kind of brown gradient going on between the different hues of brown over here. And I'm going to take the yellow ochre, that's the last one. A little much, but it's kind of cool actually. Kind of cool. The Venetian red, this red on the outside, gives you that primal feel, doesn't it? Something about that color just is like ancient, antiquity. Older than that even. It makes me think of the Pompeii walls. I know some people call it Pompeii red, but it seems so much more old than that. And it's odd because when you think of like primal stuff and those ancient colors, you don't really think of the rich colors, right? You don't really think of rich going with primordial, but it is. Who can explain why? And I guess the other thing, just since I bothered to talk about it, and I'm about to fill in this color over here, the other reason why I mentioned that game, I know it's very out of character for me to mention a video game, I really never play them anymore, is because when I was thinking about it, I also thought about how like the aesthetic communicates so much, and there's this weird cohesion in like the primordial, there's a weird sync up between like primordial, ancient, and mystical. It's almost like an intuitive connection that your mind makes. Like if you start thinking about like early humanity and the symbolism associated with that and all that ancient stuff, you kind of do start to think about like, you know, like bones and dirt and fire and, you know, that stage of human civilization if you subscribe to that model. Some people actually don't, but, you know, it's kind of this oddly like cohesive aesthetic. And sometimes it's almost like shamanic when you start thinking about the ancient material culture and all that stuff. And you know, even if I don't do that, I'm obviously not a shaman or something. Something I feel like I draw from that aesthetically is that kind of non-intellectual religion feeling. Not that there's anything wrong with like intellectualized religion, but I think there's something about just that feeling, you know, it's like intuitive, like you feel it, you know, and that's something I try and cultivate in my spiritual life a lot. I try and not make it so I'm just, you know, living in books and living in debates with people and living in this realm of like intellectual stuff. I mean, that's important, but maybe it's even more important, but it's not the 100% whole deal. Man, look at this ground we got going on. Look at this ground. That rules. Oh, I picked up the blue a little bit, but it's okay. This is looking good. Okay, it's 8:03. We started 10 minutes late, so we're going to wrap up just a few minutes late, but I'm kind of trying to keep us on schedule a little bit. Man, this looks awesome. Nice. I'm really into this. No one asked me anything, but it's all good. RKD said, I find video games have a weird way of digging deeper than other media and laying seeds, even if you don't play video games anymore. For me, it was Killer 7. I never heard of that game, but I'll check it out. Yeah, it's weird. It's weird. I do think about the... okay, so I'm going to paint in these two flowers, one unbloomed, one bloom, and then maybe we'll call it. Maybe we'll see. I need to put the flowers down and then outline them. But wait, I don't want to outline them because it's so antithetical to the vibe of the picture we have going on here. Let's think for a second, because the flowers, it's going to be very prissy. You know, it has to be like painted in a certain way. And I don't want that actually, because we kind of accidentally cultivated this vibe that we have going on, and I don't want to lose that. So instead what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a small plant over here. I'm checking just to make sure everything's dry. I normally don't go with like this kind of plant, but I'm going to put, I should have made it smaller, but it's fine. Put that small plant over here. And I'll put this big one over here. Sort of like it grew. I would have gotten more of the implication of that through if I used the blooming flower. But like I said, I didn't want to have to paint it. You know, then I'm outlining it. If I started outlining stuff, it would destroy the whole vibe that we've cultivated here 100%. That's good enough for me. Okay, and then I got to put the plant on top of his head, and that's going to be the last thing that we put in. And then we're going to wrap it up. This looks dope. Someone asked me, have you ever listened to King Crimson? No, actually. I had a lot of friends that did, but I didn't. I should check it out. if anyone ever wants to recommend me music stuff, I'm down. I listen to a lot of music, but I've always had this, my skepticism of anything even remotely, I know King Crimson isn't like popular, but my skepticism of like anything popular has always been in my life, and I missed out on a lot of like great art because of it, a lot of it music. I was like that kid in like middle school and high school who was like, oh, people have heard of it, I won't listen to it then, which is stupid. But so I missed out on a lot of music. I actually never even listened to like Led Zeppelin one time until I was like 21 or 22. I literally never heard them ever. I actually didn't even really know what their music sounded like. And then one night I listened to like all their albums all the way through in my room straight, and it was so epic. It was so awesome. Okay, so we got to put this plant on his head. I'm really kind of torn because I want to go with like the sort of like simple style, but it's almost going to end up being like the focus of the picture. This is something you don't want to do if you're picture making. So I shouldn't have done it this way, but you want everything to develop like a Polaroid cohesively. And what I've done right now is I've put myself in the situation where now what I paint right here, it's going to be like boom, right in the center. Everyone's going to see it. It's almost like the highlight, and I'm putting it in last. You never actually want to do that. So it's fine. I mean, it's fine for right now. Nothing bad's going to happen. But just in general, if I was like alone in my room really planning this out, I definitely wouldn't have done it that way. But it's fine. I'm going to try and pull kind of a power move here. And I'm going to go for this kind of structure. Move the light a little bit so you can see exactly what I'm doing. Cool. Perfect. So I'm going to go for this kind of... honestly, if you want real unhindered insight into what I'm thinking, I almost kind of got this structure from lotuses and Tibetan art. And then I stopped using it because I was like, well, they're lotuses. I know it's a little dim, but I just want you to be able to see exactly what I'm doing right here. You know, they're lotuses. I don't want to use it. Not for any hardcore reason, but they were so symbolic in Buddhist art for me, I kind of just stopped using it. But then I saw a water lily one time that looked just like a lotus, and I thought, all right, I'm bringing it back because if it's a water lily, that's great symbolism. The lily itself is symbolic of Virgin Mary in Christian art, and then with the water lily, you get all the symbolism of the lotus. If you want a real shout out, I jacked this exact structure from a guy named Robert Beer, but it is common in Tibetan art. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Yeah, that's good. Very cool. And then do I want to shade it? I can't leave it outlined. I can't leave it outlined. I kind of painted myself into a corner, no pun intended. Listen to Moonchild by King Crimson, pick apart the occult references, and The Court of the Crimson King is a great album. Okay, I'll check it out. What I'm going to do here... So this is the last thing we're going to do, and then we're going to wrap it up. If anyone else wants to ask me anything else, ask me, but it's the last thing we're going to do. I'm going to come in... I love that you can see the colors now. You couldn't even see this whole world over here before. I'm going to come in with the green yellow, and then maybe see if I can fade it out as we work towards the outside. Sometimes you get a really nice effect if you do it this way, but let's see. I'm moving with a lot of moving parts here. I have the lines, which are not very dark, nor are they very light. They're a medium value, if you want me to get technical, so I don't want to lose the line work here, but I also want to see if I can get the fade going. So let's see what I can do here. I'm going to dab up the top. This transition is, oh shit. This transition is way too strong. Let's see. But yeah, in the chat was said, video games kind of puncture this deeper level. Yeah, it's interesting. I stopped playing them pretty early on. But sometimes I feel like as my spiritual path goes more and more, it leads to very unexpected places. And at a certain point, I feel like I started taking like an inventory of my mind. Like I started poking around in my brain, almost literally like an attic. I guess that's a very cliche metaphor. But almost literally like an attic, and just looking around and saying, what's here? Like, why is this here? Like, do I need this here anymore? And just going through it all. Yeah, I'm going to lose a little bit of the structure on the lotus here, but on the water lily. Shouted myself out, but it's okay. And a lot of that stuff, when I'm going through the attic, is like stuff from old video games when I was a kid. And sometimes I kind of trip out wondering, how much did like playing Pokemon and stuff like affect my perception of the world when I was like a little kid? Probably a lot, man. Probably a lot. But was that bad? Not really. Maybe it was sort of like an intro to symbolic thinking. I think that's part of why. For most kids, man, this looks dope. I'm just going to leave that white actually with the high contrast. It looks sick. I think for a lot of kids, video games were one of the first introductions they had to like symbolic thinking. If you really think about it, even just something like Pokemon, which I haven't thought about for a really long time, you know, even just like, oh, this is a fire creature, this is a water creature, this is an air creature, you know, stuff like that. I mean, it's almost like training your mind, like, to think about things in like a deeper symbolic way. If only we had harnessed it. Anyway, boom, perfect timing. It's 8:11. Someone said, yeah, I haven't gamed in weeks now. It's interesting. I feel like I have a lot more time these days. Yeah, that's my thing, man. I mean, I'm not even like against gaming, and I really do need some way to not be working 24/7, because sometimes I feel like I'm gonna go insane. But I just can't. I don't know. I think about it. I actually bought one of these like controllers to plug into my computer, but I haven't done it. So if anyone has any recommendations and wants to try and push me over the edge, let me know. Mostly I just feel like driving around in Grand Theft Auto sometimes. Anyway, we did it. We arrived pretty much exactly on time. We started like 5-10 minutes late. So, oh wait. I'm gonna move the palette. I was gonna say I always feel the need to recap at the end, but that's my catchphrase at the end of the show. I always feel the need to recap, but you were just here. You just saw the whole thing, so I don't need to recap it for you. What I do need to do is just move the gray palette so we can actually see what's going on. Oh, this looks dope. This looks very solid. Very, very, very cool. Nice. Okay. Someone said opinion on Terry Davis. I think I know who that is, but I just want to make sure before I go off about him, so ask me next show. I'll look into it. Someone said, blows my mind the first 150 to 200 Pokemon were made by one dude. Yeah, it's really sick, man. It's really, really awesome. All right. We're here. We got to the end. Themes wrapping up. Preparation, preparatory culture, both in our lives, in ourselves, and in the civilization at large. Us being a microcosm of the civilization. Naturally, it makes sense that would be the case. If anyone wants a cool phrase to look into after the show, you can look up something called ontology recapitulates phylogeny. I think that's what it is. You can check that out. Otherwise, we're here. And we kind of, I don't want to say we wrapped up, but when I started with the Clement of Alexandria STROMATA stuff, I wanted to hit that. I wanted to hit exactly what we just did, where he says, you know, isn't it interesting to think about maybe Greek philosophy was a preparation for them receiving the gospel? I thought that was super interesting. So we hit it. And I'm not exactly sure if we'll keep going into the STROMATA or if we're going to jump to a few other things. We're definitely going to keep it in the early Christian zone for a minute. I have a few ideas for things I want to hit. We might move over to another book that's very similar but almost the opposite. There's a few guys I want to hit, so I'm really excited. And if you're here, thanks for watching with me. Thanks for sticking through to the end. I got a lot of really cool plans for stuff we're going to do. I'm eventually going to mix up the picture making, but I mean, this just called for the painting so badly because of the colorful nature of it. So I'm amped. And we'll see what happens next week. But that's the show. Thanks for coming. Thanks for sticking around. And thanks for doing the work you do. Speaking of you being a microcosm of your civilization, we're making it happen. We're changing things. We're fighting forces of darkness that operate on tiny and impossibly large scales. And this was a break from it. But now we're going back. Now we return to the spiritual battlefield, the spiritual chessboard. And I will see you guys online. Oh wait, where we all hang out. Also, just this is literally the last thing. I'm on all different platforms now. Not for any reason. If you're on Twitter, you're not going to miss anything, but I'm trying to cast my lures everywhere. So on Instagram and even Tumblr. I'm not a Tumblr person, obviously. I don't know how to use it, but I just post my stuff there. So check me out there. And if you have any tips on other things I should do, maybe you're really good at Tumblr or something, let me know. Otherwise, that's it. And I will see you guys, that's the catchphrase, on the internet where we all hang out. See you guys later.